So, welcome to the first lecture. I'm going to try to do this, as I've said before, as closely to how an actual lecture class would happen, with you in the room and me, like the ancient person that I am, using an overhead projector and writing my notes up. But they're my notes, so they're very, very brief, and you need to very quickly decide how much extension, how much addition you need to put on in order for them to be effective notes for you. Just a very, very common skill that is not just a scholastic skill. I can't tell you how many times I've taken notes in meetings, and later on, when I needed to do something or I had an assignment, is that relying completely on my memory was not gonna work. And sometimes I'd look at the notes and go, oh, I didn't write all of that down. I really should have written more of this down. So even after all these years, you kind of necessarily wind up with some issues. Now, the good thing is you've got this recording. So if you do look at your notes and get totally confused, if you keep track of what video you're watching and then make notes on your notes, like this is 10 minutes in, you know, it's got the clock on it. This is 10 minutes in, this is 15 minutes in, you know, this is 5 minutes in. If later you look at your notes and something doesn't really make that much sense, you go, oh, it was between the 5 and the 10 minute mark. That narrows it down. I should be able to find it, as opposed to having to watch the entire video again. I'm trying to keep these a little shorter. It tends to get out of control, so I tend to run 20 minutes on these things when I really should be running 10 to 12 would be nice. But, because I'm too far away really to see the clock. And once I get talking, I get into class mode, which is almost an hour. And so sometimes it takes me a while to figure out, I need to stop here, put this video up, put the next one up as another installment. When you do, if you do need to get a hold of me, the lab extension, call into FMCC, 8864, we'll ring the phone right across the room there. But as I've said before, I'd rather it not ring while I have people in here taking labs. So these are the hours that you can expect me to be in here. There may be times where I'm not here during these periods, but it's gonna be unusual. It's the end of July right now, and it is 8:30 in the morning, and I am in here and will be in here for most of the day doing things like this and feeding the animals, and trying to finalize the calendar and do all the sorts of things that need to be done in preparation for this bizarre semester. So Monday, I'm here for, that would be a lecture day for me. So I'm in here probably doing lectures, and if you occasionally interrupt me with a phone call, I'll survive. But I should warn you, every once in a while that may happen where I just stop the video like right in the middle because the phone's ringing. Tuesday, this would be sandwiched between the two labs I have on Tuesday. Wednesday's for me another lecture day. Thursday I have the lab and before and after, and Friday is a lecture day. So I will answer the phone. Takes me a few rings to get across the room to it. It's not a cell phone, and I do have a long cord. So that's my access. You can always email me, but that's my phone access if you actually want to talk to me. And to tell you the truth, I'm fine with you coming in. If you want to make the trip and come in for papers, that can be really useful. Is that if I pre-correct a paper for you, the easiest way for me to do it is to have you sit right beside me, and I will go through the thing, and I will mark it, but I'll tell you why I'm marking it, as opposed to you getting a pre-corrected paper back and going, I'm not sure why this is what this mark means. Generally, that means you misspelled something. I do tend to explain things better. Keep in mind, for most of your questions, a lot of your questions have to do with due dates and procedures and how do you do this and how do you do that. And if it's a simple, like basic setup question, then it's in the syllabus. What did we cover in class last week? It's in the syllabus. What's your late homework policy? It's in the syllabus. When are your office hours? It's in the syllabus. How will my grade be computed? It's in the syllabus. It's all in there. And it's online. And it's linked from Blackboard. You got all sorts of ways to find it. You doing anything tonight? What's to do? Are you serious? Have you ever heard of studying? I spend at least 7 hours a night studying, constantly inching my GPA ever higher. And why? Points. It takes points to get into a good college and points to land a good job. Life, my friend, is all about points. God, I wish they'd put a Starbucks on the quad. I'm not sure more caffeine is your answer, Phoebe. I know that you can't always read the things. I'm not doing performance art here. I just know on a little screen this isn't necessarily that visible. What's the point? The point is that what this class is for the vast majority of students everywhere that are taking the equivalent of this class. If you were to say to them, what are you doing this for? They go, well, I'm pre-med, sometimes pre-vet. I want to be a biochemist, is what I would have said. But I would have been a huge exception to the rule. So a tremendous number of people are coming in with this drive to do very, very well. Most of them are totally delusional. My daughter was a biology major, and even as a junior, third year and fourth year, she had a lab partner that she did a lot of stuff with. And to tell you the truth, I don't remember his name, because we always just called him Hopeless Pre-Med, because he had like a 2.2 GPA, and still seemed to think at some point he was going to get into medical school. What's typically happens is you go to school with a bunch of rabid grade-seeking people, and it can, in some environments, be kind of cutthroat, but they need those grades just to kind of get on the potential list to get into med and vet school. It's very difficult to get even looked at in terms of your application if you don't have a pretty good GPA. And I'll tell you a little secret, a pretty good GPA from the right school, at least the school that you're getting your bachelor's from. Community college is a great way to get into one of those programs, but it turns out, like I had a student who was interested and went to Upstate Medical College in Syracuse, Upstate Med School. And for their information sessions, they used to have information sessions once a month, and you could go in, listen, and then ask questions. And she had a list of, I think there were like 6 schools in New York, where she said, yeah, those are the schools we trust the grades from those schools. So if you do really well in those schools, you've got a leg up right at the beginning. And then there were a whole bunch of other things she told them that were pretty interesting. Anyway, for this class, this particular class is kind of an ease-in class. So it's not going to be too terribly crazy, but if you are looking at a high threshold program in your future, even for here, like the Rad Tech program, or even the nursing program, or physical therapy, or veterinary school, or med school, then you got to be cranking right out of the gate. It's just the nature of the beast. Now, I mentioned that this is an ease-in class. I should have talked about that in the introduction. I haven't recorded my introduction session yet, other than the one I got online in the middle of July. But for this specific class, I haven't recorded my introduction because I'm still not entirely sure what the rules are going to be. And I don't want to record it and then have to re-record it. So I'm going to record it pretty close to the beginning of the semester. But what I should have talked about is what we do the second semester. I used, when I first started teaching, that was the first semester. And it's a lot of, biology is very atomic now. It's very chemical, it's very molecular. And for the preparation that you're typically getting in your high school classes, it is going to make your heads explode. And that's what it used to do. So we decided to shift that to the second semester and use the first semester to do other things that you get in a first year majors biology class, but are maybe a little bit easier to absorb and digest. So what I'm gonna do is set a bunch of stuff up that I'm going to come back to in the second semester on a molecular basis, but we're gonna just kind of skirt that level of complexity for the first semester. Like, we'll actually go back through the list I'm about to give you for this first chapter, but we're gonna look at it in much more detail, much more complexity, whereas here we're just gonna basically introduce your basic list of what makes something alive. Congratulations, you've won a lifetime supply of life. Just last night, I was having dinner, talking about viruses. And one of my friends went, "So what do you think, alive or not alive?" And I gave them my standard answer, which you'll hear at the end of the chapter, is I don't think the viruses care what we think, whether they're alive or not alive. But being a parasite biologist, the way that viruses behave is that they're close enough to me to treat them like they were alive. But that is a big question. Is something alive or is something not alive? One of my other friends said that she looked at viruses as self-replicating little robots. And that's actually a pretty good metaphor for viruses. And then the question is, if we had self-replicating robots, would we consider them alive? And when I think about it that way, I'm thinking, no, we probably wouldn't, depending on what else they could do. So, is this alive? Is this not alive? So there's kind of a standard list that you get in biology classes. The order varies, the bullet points kind of vary, but we're gonna start with features of life. And the first thing is you've got what are called genetic systems. Here, let me correct. Well, let me just show you, because you're not going to be able to read the caption anyway. And the caption here is, I can see it was a serious mistake to have shown you my family album. Now, the operative word there is family, is that this is what my family looks like. And the reason that it could be scary is because you assume that families are genetic systems, that information is in some sort of form that can be passed to descendants. You need a coding system. You need an information carrying system. So a computer is a genetic system. You can pass software off and reproduce it somewhere else and make that computer do what this computer can do. And that's basically what a coding system is. Here's the information you need to be like me. And so it's a pretty part and parcel of reproduction, which we're gonna get to a little bit farther down the list. In our case, on our planet, we have DNA, and in our DNA we have codes. And from those codes we make proteins. And from those proteins we do everything else. All of your chemistry is essentially based on enzymes getting the chemistry to do what the chemistry is supposed to do. So even though proteins are not the only thing we're made of, in order to make the lipids that form the barriers around our cells, you have protein enzymes that build those. In order to I'm trying to think of the other. In order to make more DNA, you've got protein enzymes to help you make more DNA. In order to produce the carbohydrates that are basic energy fuel, you have a whole protein-based system that pulls the energy from somewhere and puts it into a carbohydrate storage system. So these proteins are the be-all and end-all of what makes us work, but we don't make proteins from information delivered from other proteins. We have this coding molecule, DNA, that makes the proteins happen. You'll hear a term that, it's a fairly recent term. If you pick up a book that's 40 years old and you run into it, it'll actually be defined an entirely different way than it's defined today. That happens in biology, where terms will shift definitions, shift applications. And so an old word applied to its modern equivalent, it doesn't apply in some cases. This is totally different from epigenetic. Used to be things like language, things that could be passed on, but were not embedded in DNA. Now we consider epigenetics to be, okay, how does a genetic system work? Well, we got all these codes. Are you using them, every single one of them all the time? No, of course not. Are you using every single one of them everywhere? Like where you've got a whole bunch of different cells in our bodies, they all have DNA in them. But each one is using its own codes to do its own thing. And so that means that you have to have a system to activate and deactivate codes. Get these codes to work to make a muscle cell, get these codes to work to make a nerve cell, get these codes to work to make a reproduction cell. Oh, wait a minute, not quite yet. So timing is a big deal of epigenetics, is that you use codes in some situations and not in other situations. I'm going to talk a lot about the pandemic as we go through this. And so antibodies are proteins. If you've had COVID like I have, you have to activate a whole protein system. First to try to keep it from killing you in the first place, and then to set up antibodies to keep it from reinfecting you. Those are all epigenetic features. They're part of the code system, but it's more of a control system. Remember I said that epigenetic used to be things like language, things that could be passed on with no DNA basis? Well, we now call those things mimetic. We call those bits of code memes, which has been picked up on the internet as things that you share around. But that's now what the epigenetics is. Okay, sorry, I'm watching my light flicker, and I haven't found my replacement bulbs yet. I stored them somewhere in order to the lab was supposed to be renovated over the summer, which didn't happen, but I put a lot of stuff in storage. You don't really need to know this, but if the bulb burns out, then the video will end and pick up at another time, right in the middle of a sentence possibly. Mimetics, information that are passed on in totally non-DNA ways. So language is mimetic. Territory, if a mama bear passes its territory on to a baby bear, that's mimetic. Used to be epigenetic. If a plant can set itself up in a good place so that its seeds are set up in a good place, it is something that's passed on to their offspring. It can give them advantages and disadvantages, but it is not DNA based. So that's what mimetic is. Culture is mimetic. But we tend to think of mimetic in terms of things that people do that we pass on, but other organisms can do that as well. Not as commonly, but it's not that unusual. Next thing on the list. Living things are complicated, and in order for them to function, they have to be able to pull themselves together and get themselves to run. They are self-organizing systems. So You start with a seed, and the seed needs to grow into another plant. It uses the DNA to produce the proteins, but the proteins all have to work together in a very specific way. This is one of the problems that people have in terms of creationism, is that they look at the complexities and go, well, that can't be, that can't just have been thrown together. And of course it wasn't. It was built step by step by step, bit by bit by bit, to get more and more and more complicated. Is that lots of stuff works that way. You go back through history and look at the step by step production of Western civilization, is that it doesn't need to have been created fully formed, and you can follow the steps to get there. It turns out in biology you can do the same thing. Okay, I'm gonna stop at this point. We're only part way down the list, but I said I was gonna try to control this. I gotta do that in order to see the time. And we're already over 20 minutes in, so we'll pick this up in the next installment.